Hello again all, this is Ian with you. It's the 17th of October 2021 and I'm beginning a series of short videos from the wonderful Gospel of John. John, the beloved disciple, the eyewitness, who is eager for people to come to believe. He wants to express his actuality, the eyewitness accounts of what he saw. And a number of times in his gospel he says, I've written these things that you may believe. And in fact the word believe or associated words occurs in 21 chapters about 100 times. So that's his motive, that's what he's looking for, to help people come to faith. And in John chapter 1 he introduces Jesus in a unique and altogether different way to the other gospel writers, because he introduces him as the Logos, the principle that brings order out of chaos and establishes and underlies the meaning of all things. And John sees that this Logos, this principle, this word, was made flesh to live among us. It's my purpose not to dwell on that word, but to say some things about what John saw about the Logos becoming flesh. He says the Logos was enfleshed and lived among us, and as he lived among us, John says, we beheld something. What was it that we beheld? John says, and we beheld his glory. That's where I'll dwell for a few minutes, because glory in the Bible is easily misunderstood. Radiance and glory are actually two different things. Kabod in the Old Testament and doxa in the New Testament are words that are defined as glory, but they mean essentially weightiness, or something having weight. They carry the idea of what a thing is full of, what comprises it, what's its composition. It's easy for us to confuse radiance with glory, but one's the cause and the other is the product. I use this illustration quite often. The composition of our nearest star, the sun, is the trillions of tons of plasma and gas and fusion and reactions that are going on within it. That is what it's full of. That is its glory. Its radiance is the warmth that we feel and the light that we see, and lots of other things like ultraviolet and various kinds of radiation that we can't see. Let me illustrate further. The author of the book of Hebrews, in the opening chapter, talks about Jesus, and he says the Son, S-O-N, is the radiance of God's glory and the express image or representation of his nature. So there's the idea again. The Son is the radiance of God's glory, the outshining. Now we know what God's glory is. We know what comprises him. We know what he's made up of, because Moses asked him to show it to him. Moses was daring enough to say to God, show me your glory, and God obliged. And he said to Moses, I'll hide you and I will make all my goodness pass before you. That's what God's glory is. That's his substance. That's what he's full of, utter and total goodness. So now when John says that we beheld his glory, he then describes what Jesus was full of, what comprised him. He said we beheld his glory, full of grace and truth. What constitutes God so far as human relationship is concerned is these two things. The most evident attributes for John that distinguished God's presence among us in human form were grace and truth. And these were manifested in Jesus' works and words. Every action that flowed from him was grounded in grace, grace, grace. And every word that came from his lips was truth, truth, truth. And just as the Son expressed the radiance of the Father's glory, so the words and the deeds of Jesus were in turn the radiance or the outshining of his glory. And John speaks further of the fullness or substance or weightiness and what comes from it as he continues in this famous passage, and he writes something astonishing. He says, "And of his fullness, out of his fullness, we have all received, and grace after grace," or grace over against grace, as some translations have it. What on earth does John mean? Well, he explains what he means. This is something I believe is easy to miss, for too many have treated God's activity toward mankind as having two flavours. There is one flavour in the Old Covenant and a different flavour in the New. But my conviction is that there is only one major flavour. It is grace all the way. We'll deal more with that in another session. And there may at times be severe grace in the New Covenant as well, but always grace. For as John explains it, he says, "For out of his fullness we have all received grace upon grace." Grace after grace, one grace after another. And he explains this way, "For the law was given through Moses." That's grace manifestation number one. God revealing what is like and providing the standard and the template for mankind so that we knew what God's expectation was, like the speed signs on our highways. Instead of leaving us bereft and without hope, something was given by God, and something given is grace. But then later along the timeline, grace came, arrived in a person. So that's why John says it's one grace after another. The law was given through Moses, but grace and truth arrived in Jesus Christ. So it's one grace after another. And then John says this, "The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him." And the Greek verb that John uses there is the word from which we get our English word exegete, to exegete something, to lead or to draw out, to fully explain. To exegete a biblical text is to draw out the riches of its meaning and to make it plain. It's exactly what I'm doing with these passages and verses from John's Gospel, explaining and drawing out the meaning that the writer intended us to understand, what he had in his heart, by examining the words and expressions he employed, making them plain and understandable. In effect, Jesus has exegeted or fully explained God the Father to us. Jesus is God explained. Jesus is God made plain. That's why Jesus could say, "He who has seen me has seen the Father." I am revealing him to you. I am what he's like. I have brought all that God the Father is in here with me. And you can behold it. And behold his glory. And in fact, in Jesus, every question that we have about God, about life, about eternity, about the Father, is answered in me. Look at me and you'll see and understand the Father. I encourage you to fix your eyes on Jesus today, for in him, Paul said in Colossians, dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, in bodily form. Jesus is the answer to all your questions about God. Seek him. Look at him in every dilemma, in every puzzle about life, about God, about eternity, about suffering, about all of those things. The answers are all in Jesus. If you've never trusted him, I encourage you to look to him now. Turn your eyes upon Jesus, for the answers are in him. He is God, brought in here in human flesh. If you began once to trust him but been slipping back, will you turn your eyes on him again today, and in him see the answer and the answers that you need? And God bless you as you do.